in accordance with Governor Baker's executive order. We're having this hearing via Zoom. This allows us to balance doing our jobs with also being able to keep everyone safe. The public may watch this hearing on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, and FiOS 964. And it will also be live streamed on www.boston.gov/city-council-TV. Today's hearing is on docket 0262. It's an authorization for the amount of $20,670,810 in the form of a grant for the emergency rental assistance awarded by the United States Department of the Treasury to be administered by DND, Department of Neighborhood Development. The grant will fund assistance to households that are unable to pay rent and utilities due to COVID-19 pandemic. This matter was sponsored by the mayor and was referred to the Committee on Housing and Community Development on February 3rd. I am joined today by my colleagues so far, Councillor Ed Flynn from District 2. Also joining us from the administration is Tim Davis, DND Deputy Director, Taylor Kane, DND Assistant Director, Catherine or Katie Ford, who's Office of Housing Stability Operation Manager, and Rick Wilson, the DND Deputy Director of Finance. We've also been joined by the Director of DND, Sheila Dillon. So I'm going to go ahead and, because I don't expect there to be much of a back and forth, let's just learn what the money's going to do, and then we'll have any questions. Oh, I see Councillor Mejia has joined us. Councillor Mejia is also here. So I think I don't know if someone could let her in if she's on the waiting room, but just wanted to note that. So again, this is just about funding. So we're going to go ahead and have the presentation first before any councillor questions. I believe Taylor or Rick has the floor.
I do. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chairperson Edwards, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Mejia. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today about Boston's Rental Relief Fund. For the record, I am Tim Davis, Deputy Director for Policy Development and Research at the Department of Neighborhood Development. In the first week of January, Congress passed a $900 billion coronavirus relief bill as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, which provided for $25 billion in emergency rental assistance to be distributed to states and localities with more than 200,000 people. Boston was eligible for and has received $20,670,810. The state has received $421 million. The previous administration released guidance on use of these funds on January 19th. The documentation requirements were rather onerous, however, and the Biden administration released new guidance on February 22nd. This guidance, as well as the already established rules, say that federal emergency rental assistance funds can be used for renters making less than 80% of area median income. It can be used for a total of 12 months of rent and utilities, with extensions possible to up to 15 months. All these rent and utilities would have to have become due since March 13th. We can pay for both back rent and utilities, but also prospective rent, although it has to be renewed at 3-month intervals. Utilities do include internet service. We can serve our BHA tenants and tenants in other subsidized properties. We cannot pay for what was conceived of when the original CARES Act is that public housing authorities and others would actually income recertify tenants, and therefore those rents would be lower. However, we are finding that some tenants still can't pay their portion, or they can't pay utilities. And so this funds would allow us to do that. And we are working with BHA on helping BHA tenants. It also allows for housing stability services, such as mediation, court interventions, and other processes. The documentation requirements are fairly broad. While they do want us to have documentation as much as possible, we may use other verification for other forms of assistance. So things like if they're already eligible for SNAP or Mass Health or other programs, that means that they're necessarily under 80% of AMI, we can use those. In cases where none of that is possible, we can use written attestations, but of course, other documents are preferred. Payments are generally made to landlords and/or utility companies. However, there are provisions that do allow us to make payments directly to tenants if the landlord has not responded after reasonable attempts have been made. I'll now turn over to Taylor Kane to provide an update on the Rental Relief Fund in terms of how we're proposing to set up the next round of funding for us, and also to look at what we've done so far. And Taylor has a presentation.
Before you go, Taylor, I'm just going to make a quick announcement of who we've been joined by. We've also been joined by Councilors Bach and Councilors Braden. To the councilors that just joined us, we went straight to the presentation. There were no opening remarks. So we're just going to allow for Taylor to go through. These are, I guess, a separate topic, related but separate, right? This is on rental relief, nothing to do with the $20 million, or is this $20 million going into that?
Well, it is actually the requirement is $20 million as it goes towards rental relief.
Perfect.
So there's not many decisions for us to make about what pot we're putting the 20 million into. There are decisions to make about how we program it. And so Taylor's going to go over the rent relief program today and how we plan to use the 20 million. So thank you, Taylor.
I'm just going to make this a bit larger. Great. So thank you, Council, for having us here this afternoon. I'm going to quickly go over the Rental Relief Fund at a glance, what we've done to date, and then hoping to spend the bulk of our time sharing a bit about how we've been understanding the future need and how we're planning to program the $20 million in additional resources. So the Rental Relief Fund at a glance, as Tim mentioned, was created in April of 2020. And over the past 11 months, we've distributed $7 million in rental assistance to date and have conducted 2 lotteries over the course of spring and summer of 2020. We've launched a new online application process and have distributed assistance to over 1,700 households across the city of Boston. So for the Rental Relief Fund has operated in 3 rounds over the course of the past 11 months. And what you'll see on the screen is just a snapshot of the changes that we've seen over the course of those 3 rounds in terms of the average amount of unpaid rent that we've seen from households, a slow increase over time. We've also seen an increase in the average award amount, and I'll talk a little bit about why we've seen that pretty significant increase for round 3. We are also tracking the number of households who have received assistance to date over the course of the 3 rounds, and then breaking down the total amount of assistance distributed to date over the course of the 3 rounds, and mindful that round 3 is ongoing, so that 3 million number that is on the screen currently will continue to increase. So over the past 11 months, we've made a number of modifications, really trying to be responsive to the need that we've seen from both applicants who are applying, but also the partner agencies that we're working with. So we've created a one-stop application process where applicants can complete all of their materials at once, and really enabling tenants and landlords to work together to submit a completed application. We've really prioritized language and technology access, or ensuring language access, and ensuring kind of flexibility in ways in which residents can submit materials. So we've made sure that all of the Rent Relief Fund applications and additional materials are available in 11 different languages, have created a series of how-to guides for tenants and landlords to explain the different components of the process. We've hosted workshops with community groups, and we've continued to utilize the language line to really be able to meet the needs of constituents in Boston. And then we've made several modifications as it relates to tenant protections. So for the 3rd round, we increased the amount of assistance that households who are court involved who are able to receive, so increasing that amount to $6,000. We updated our owner contract to include a commitment to participating in landlord and tenant mediation, and including a commitment to notify our Office of Housing Stability if there were any changes in an applicant's tenancy. So want to quickly go over what we've seen to date in terms of round 3, because that really informs some of the programming changes that we're making for this additional 20 million in assistance. So for round 3, which are applications that have been received from October of 2020 to the end of February 2021, we've received about 3,400 applications. Around 1,795 of those have been deemed ineligible, and I'll go into those different reasons for ineligibility. We have about 741 applications that are pending, meaning that they're awaiting tenant and or landlord documentation. Between October and February of this year, we've sent out assistance to 650 households for a total amount of around 3 million distributed in this most recent round of funding. So when we look at our reasons for ineligibility for our round 3 participants, the majority of applicants who are deemed ineligible are residents of the Boston Housing Authority. We also have a number of applicants who are reported receiving mobile housing vouchers or who are past rent relief fund recipients. They're asterisks by these 3 reasons for ineligibility because these are areas where we're either have already made program modifications to really help meet the need of those applicants, or that we have additional resources or programs in development, that will meet the needs of those households. The remaining reasons for ineligibility are applicants who have reported being full-time college or graduate students or who are non-City of Boston residents. We are also keeping track of the racial and ethnic breakdown of applicants. So what we've seen in terms of the applications received in our ongoing rental relief round is that 31% identify as Latino. We have around 28% of applicants who identify as Black or African American, 16% identify as white, Asian 6%, and then Black, African American, and white 3%, Black, African American, Latino 1%, Middle Eastern, West Asian, and North African as 1%, and then we have 4% of applicants who have declined to report their race and ethnicity. And then we're also keeping track of the primary spoken language at home. So around 947 of our applications have applicants have said that English is the primary language spoken at home. 392 applicants have said that Spanish is the primary language spoken at home. And then I have the breakdown for the remaining languages, which we also have applications available for on the screen as well. In addition to looking at the racial and ethnic breakdown, the primary language spoken at home, we also want to be mindful of the geographic distribution of assistance. So what's on the screen is something that we've shared with the council before, and this we see a similar trend in terms of seeing the largest number of applications coming from neighborhoods of East Boston, Dorchester, and Roxbury. Also seeing high numbers of applications coming in from Hyde Park, Brighton, and Mattapan being kind of the next tier of neighborhoods where significant applications are coming in. This type of information is really helpful for us as we think about outreach and where neighborhoods where we know there's disproportionate impact, being really mindful about how we're reaching out to those communities. And then lastly, we're keeping track of how applicants are hearing about the Rental Relief Fund. So the largest number of folks are saying that they're hearing about the fund from City of Boston social media. Also really interesting to note that friends or family or nonprofit organizations or community groups are another area where folks are hearing about this assistance. So this is another place to think about additional outreach efforts. Property management companies or landlords are kind of the next tier of ways in which folks are hearing about this resource. We did email out to BPS families and students, and that accounted for a large percentage of new applications as well. And then the Office of Housing Stability website and newspaper or radio are other areas where folks are hearing about the Rental Relief Fund. So as we think about our future need and how we're planning to program the additional 20 million in assistance, we wanted to start by looking at what do our current applications look like to date. So what we're currently seeing is that we have around 25%, sorry, I can't see that tab of my screen, percentage of households who owe more than $4,000 in rental arrears. We're also paying really close attention to the percentage of households who are reporting unpaid rent unable to pay, and that's around 58% of our current applications. Around 30% of our current applications are saying that they're going to face future difficulty paying rent, and then around 10% of our current applications report being court involved. And this is a percentage that does fluctuate a little bit because as applicants are moving through the process, they are letting us know if they have received a notice to quit even after submitting their initial application. In addition to keeping track of the housing status of our current applications as we think about future need, we're also being mindful of the different reasons for loss of income in the industries where our applicants are working. So most applicants are saying their reason for loss of income is around employer reduction or shutdown of operations. We're seeing that most of our applicants are coming in industries that we know have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. So thinking about food services, leisure and hospitality, also education and health services, and those working in the gig or informal economy. So when we think about our new program, I'll spend some time going over our new guidelines, eligibility, and the program preferences for this new funding. So we are planning to increase the amount of assistance that households are eligible to receive to $15,000 and increase the amount of time households are eligible to receive assistance for to 12 months, with this option for an additional 3 months of assistance if that's needed. These funds can cover past, current, or up to 3 months of utility payments or housing energy expenses. And we are working with BHA to create a separate rental arrears program for residents of public housing. In terms of program eligibility, this will look very familiar, keeping many of our same criteria. So City of Boston residents, households at risk of homelessness or housing instability at or below 80% area median income, and really reiterating that past recipients of the Rent Relief Fund are eligible to apply for this additional assistance. And as per the guidelines, we will have a preference for households who have been unemployed for 90 days or more at the time of application, and households that are 50% AMI or below. Some of the modifications that we're currently considering for landlords in terms of conditions of participation, we're updating our funding acceptance letter to clarify their commitment to not proceed with an eviction, to dismiss an eviction case, and to participate in tenant-landlord mediation if there are any issues in tenancy that arise. And then we're encouraging participating landlords to waive any late fees as a condition for receiving payment. Our required documentation will include current lease, tenant agreement, or rent receipt, photo identification for a head of household, current pay stubs, and then we're accepting self-attestation for risk of homelessness or housing instability and financial impact due to COVID. And then an additional piece we're incorporating is a plan for housing stability. So incorporating into the 3-month recertification process, working with the applicant, working with their assigned case managers to create a housing stabilization plan. We'll be connecting applicants with resources, including the Roxbury Center for Financial Empowerment, and promoting different offerings at the Office of Housing Stability. And then I think I have one more slide and then can turn things over. We're also trying to be really mindful of the different housing and living arrangements that residents have across the city. So coming up with guidance for those who are in roommate situations that have leases, encouraging folks that are subletting, explaining the ways in which they are eligible to apply by utilizing our template for a tenant agreement. We're also having conversations around how to support households that are in informal housing arrangements. So those are some items that are under consideration. And then for households that have landlords who refuse to participate, we're going to work with those applicants to secure new housing in the city of Boston. So assisting with security deposits, first or last month's rent, and moving expenses. And then the last slide is around how we're approaching engagement and collaboration. So we're going to continue to do outreach to residents who are in housing court, working with different landlord organizations, such as Mass Landlords and Small Property Owners Association, to host a landlord forum about the fund. working with community-based organizations, including past Boston Resiliency Fund recipients, tenant rights groups, to really get the word out about this resource, and then connecting with different city departments to ensure that they are sharing this information through their networks. And then there are some web page updates that we're planning to make to really clarify the resources for tenants and for landlords, and also outreach materials, and increasing our own application assistance via our ability to support folks who need help completing an application via phone. And I believe that's all I have.
Thank you so much. We've also been joined by Councillor Flaherty. I didn't know, oh yes, so everyone else is playing backup singer, right? From the, okay, dokie. So okay. So what we'll do is we'll go through a round, and I know that some of our colleagues joined in the middle of your excellent presentation, Tim, about the differences, and I have a feeling some of them will be asking, what does this money go for? If it doesn't hurt anybody in terms of time, I'm going to just go ahead and ask him to go through again what the money does to avoid questions about what the money does. So go ahead, Tim.
That's fine. So this is
okay. There's a back. Someone. Okay.
Okay. So this is a new pot of money.
There's a ringing sound that comes through. Me on my end, and everyone else.
No, it's my end too. Tim, you've got a back feed.
I don't know how to fix it.
It's like a loud fire alarm.
I don't. Is he getting it?
As soon as you open your mouth.
Okay, I don't know what to do about it.
You're making my dog crazy.
I will. My document Taylor real fast, and she can read through that here.
Okay.
Do you want to try getting rid of the video, perhaps?
Better.
Maybe try.
No, it wasn't better, Sheila. It wasn't better.
Rick, why don't you read that part?
Sure, I think there's a series of bullets here. Tim has made it very easy for me. So this emergency rental assistance funding came from the bill that was passed by Congress. I think it was the beginning of January, the Appropriations Act. It was the $900 billion, the last relief bill that was passed. The city of Boston got $20.6 million of funding out of that big pot. It has to be used for emergency rental assistance. It has to be used for renters under 80% of area median income. We can fund up to 12 months of rent and utilities, and we can extend that up to 15 months in certain circumstances. This is retroactive to last March, so it has to be, COVID related is the idea. It has to be COVID related problems paying rent. It can be used for prospective rent as long as we review the circumstances in the application every 3 months. Utilities can include internet service. We can use it to fund to help BHA tenants for the tenants portion of the rent and utilities, and we can also use a portion of it for housing stability services. So there wasn't, as Tim put it, there isn't a lot of decision making for us around what to do with the money. It has to be used for rental assistance. We have our rental relief fund, as Taylor just walked through, so we're essentially adding it to that pot and making some kind of tweaks to the program to comply with the new funding, and kind of relaunching and doing additional outreach to make sure people know that's there.
The only thing I would add, sorry, is that the state did get over $400 million for rental, the same use statewide. So we do plan on tapping into some of that as well. Not us, but we anticipate that Boston residents will be also, utilizing some of that money.
Some other things was I think the income eligibilities, if you made less than 80% AMI, right? That there was a 12-month, that they could pay for up to 12 months of rent, that I think had to been impacted since March of 13th of last year, that it can pay for back and pro rent, which is good. It paid for utilities, and utilities finally included internet. BHA residents to certain extents and certain circumstances can apply. Let's see, if you're already on SNAP and other public benefits, you may be considered probably likely already qualified to get this. What I really liked also is that it does technically still go to the landlords and utility companies, but you can make payments to the tenants provided the landlord doesn't respond. I didn't get the notes within a certain amount of time though. And these were, for my colleagues, these are big upgrades from the last administration's kind of strict, overly burdensome way of interpreting how to get relief to folks. So I just want to make sure that we were aware of that. Provided, as Rick said, housing stability money, which helped with mediation and I believe court intervention programs as well. So thank you so much. I just wanted my colleagues to all know where the money's going, or we ask where the money's going. So Councilor Flynn had to step away, but Councilor Mejia.
Can you hear me? I'm so sorry.
Yep, good to go. You went on mute. Okay.
I'm muted and my daughter is calling me at the same time, so I got muted. Can you hear me okay?
We're good to go. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I guess for me, first of all, let me just say I'm incredibly grateful to the administration. You guys always show up on time, ready to do the work, and you are one of the best departments to work with. You know, since I just wanted to say thank you to the chair for calling this hearing. Since the start of COVID, we have seen how the city has adjusted to finding new ways to accommodate residents, particularly those who are facing housing instability. I've mentioned before that this issue is both personal and professional, and I'm excited to see where we have the opportunity to continue to provide rental relief assistance. I'm just curious, can you talk a little bit about the community workshops? How many have been held? How many people have shown up? What languages they've been offered in? And I'm also curious if we are considering any specific outreach to certain communities, such as communities who speak languages other than English, elder communities, artists, etc.
Yes, those are great questions. So can get back to you on the exact number of attendees at the different workshops that we've held, but the workshops that we've hosted to date have really been focused on meeting with community organizations that have those relationships with residents and walking them through the application process for the rent relief fund and the different criteria so that they're better able to work with residents who are interested in applying. We are also really interested as we think about this additional assistance in doing exactly those types of workshops and hosting them in different languages to really meet the needs that we see in terms of communities whose primary language spoken at home is not English. So that is something that we have on deck for development in terms of making those connections with different community groups.
Any other questions, Councilor Mejia?
No, thank you so very much. I think that you all are all on point, and you got the chief of breaking it down here. Lydia Edwards is in the house, so I think that she will definitely follow up with some really great questions as well. So thank you so very much. Really do appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Bach?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I was having technical difficulties. I'm coming to you from outdoors, but I want to echo the thanks to the D&D team. I think seeing this program evolve and really like the data that you're capturing, I know reflects a lot of questions we'd asked at earlier hearings, and I think also reflects the fact that this program has been targeted at the folks who we want it to be targeted at. I mean, both when you look at, where people are out of work from, the neighborhoods, the diversity of the families that we're helping with this fund. I think it is a model for targeting the kind of relief that we want across agencies. And so I guess I don't have lots of critical questions. A couple of quick ones. One is just, Tim mentioned the money to the state for the same purpose. are we thinking about ways to make sure that, you know, we want them to be additive, right? We want to make sure that we're like catching different folks and not sort of the same set of documentation. And also maybe that we figure out how they're administering theirs and whether there are gaps in how they're administering theirs and how we fill that. So one thing would just be thinking about what the coordination with the state's going to look like. Another would be, do we have a sense, I mean, our overall goal is to prevent evictions here and to prevent, you know, housing loss. And I know that some of the data that you guys were showing us was suggesting, you know, we've been helping people, but it's been tip of the iceberg for some folks in terms of how much they owe. And maybe this larger amount per family that we're going to be able to do will help with that. But how are we thinking about if we find out that even beyond this sum, we just have so many families that are struggling, like how are we thinking about targeting it to the people who are sort of in the deepest holes? That would be another question. And then my last question is just, I know that there's also, I think, still funds that this council has allocated for emergency COVID use by you all that maybe aren't yet comprised by that $7 million in the rental relief fund. And maybe they're all being used for other purposes in the department, but just if we could get a quick update on unprogrammed non-federal funds for this purpose and kind of where our positioning is. So those are my three things: coordination with the state, making sure that, you know, we're hoping that the moratorium doesn't lift for some time yet, but that we're really best positioned to catch the folks who are most at risk of eviction, and then the sort of overall funding landscape on the city side as well for this purpose. Thank you.
Rick, do you want to give an overview of the funding that was allocated, and then we'll take the other?
Yep, happy to. Prior to this funding, we had, I think, been the recipient of about $58 million in funding from the CARES Act. That includes our ESG, Emergency Solutions Grant, CV funding, which is about $29 million that the council authorized us to accept and expend last year. And we've committed to date about just over half of that, although all of that has to go towards homelessness work. So we've committed most of it to rapid rehousing, some of it to emergency shelter operations like modifications to shelter, PPE, hazard pay, things like that. We're actually currently working with providers to allocate the remainder of those funds, and we think that'll be coming in the next few months. We want to be really strategic about how we commit these funds so that we come through with the other side of the pandemic in better shape than we are now. We don't want to do kind of knee-jerk, immediate actions that don't put us in a better place on the other side of this. Which brings me to our Community Development Block Grant, CDBG CV funding. We received $20 million from that source, and at this moment, all of that has been kind of earmarked for rent relief. But in light of this new funding that we've received, the emergency rental assistance funding, we want to spend that first. We have to spend that funding first because the deadline for that funding is the end of this year. And CDBG funding, we have some more time to spend. So we'll start with the emergency rental assistance funding. We don't want to kind of jump too quickly in spending our CDBG CV funding, but one area that we are looking at, if we do reprogram that funding, would be permanent supportive housing for homeless families. We know that there is a critical need there, particularly with COVID. We want to make sure that we de-densify shelters, get people off the streets out of unsafe conditions, get them into permanent housing with supportive services. So we're looking at that very closely, talking to providers, talking to developers. The CDBG CV funding could be used to, for example, acquire a property and convert it to permanent supportive housing, or to develop a permanent supportive housing, but that would obviously take longer. And then the other funding piece was the coronavirus relief fund, which the city had received $120 million for in total. We got $9.5 million of that, 8 of which went to the rent relief fund, which is what we're spending right now. And then $1.5 million we've used for permanent supportive housing for homeless women. So I think we're doing a good job at spending the funding. We have some work to do on the balance and some thinking to do on this new funding that's in front of you right now, the emergency rental assistance funding, and then as well, the relief bill that's in front of Congress right now, which we expect will include even more funding for this, again, rental assistance, as well as funding for homeless programs as well and housing development.
Maybe I could jump in on the coordination, or Taylor. So we are meeting with the state every Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock, I think it is, for a half hour. I will say, they've got more resource. So, but I think where the issue is, the state is very, very, very backed up. So, like by 6,000, I think 6,000 applications as of Monday in Boston. They are trying to make their way through the queue. So we're supporting that effort, but we're funding other people because we don't want them to get in that queue. One thing they are doing is they are going to start a fund where they are funding owners of large affordable housing developments. So all those tenants don't come into the queue, our queue or their queue. They're taking some of their money and they're funding owners, which is really going to help a great deal. I think beyond that, we're just talking about how our programs are similar, but we're not tied to the hip either. And lastly, we want to make sure that if somebody's applying to us, they're getting money from us, but they're not getting money unless it's intentional money from us and money from the state. We don't, because we hear that Treasury hates that. And if they're going to audit, that's what they're going to audit on. Did the same entity get multiple sources for the same activity? So we're working through those wrinkles as well. Taylor, I don't know if you have anything else to add about coordination.
No, I think that you covered it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to answer the piece about the housing stability and the tenants that we are helping, because our biggest fear is that we are going to pay off back rent and pay prospective rent. And then when the money runs out, that we still might be setting these tenants up to fail because they might be in a unit that's not affordable. You saw in the slides that 30% of the tenants who have received funding to date work in the hospitality industry, and we're not sure when those jobs are going to come back. So part of what we're developing right now is a system-wide response within the rental relief fund to make sure that people are doing housing counseling, that they're doing searches to make sure that they are in an affordable unit. Right now, all of our vendors at the Office of Housing Stability can do housing search for people at the same level of income, so up to 80% AMI. So we are desperately working with all the tenants who have applied to make sure that they are in an affordable unit and that they're working with their case managers to receive that assistance.
Katie, I think could you just quickly talk about the housing navigators, which Councilor Edwards is aware of, but just how they're making sure people are getting the rental relief or RAFT?
Yeah, sure. So we actually have our eyes on every single eviction case that's been filed within the city of Boston. We contact every person who has a hearing. We make sure that they know about their rights and their protections, but we also make sure that they've applied for assistance. We've doubled our housing court navigator program, so they are in the courthouse, 2 of them right there on a virtual counter every single day, helping people apply for that assistance and get those housing counseling supports as well. So that's something that we're doing. And then anyone who calls our office who's received a notice to quit or a summons, they immediately are referred to Greater Boston Legal Services, and they are referred to an attorney. And so we're excited to offer that service for folks. And again, anyone who applies for our rental relief fund in this new round of funding, they will also receive those same supports.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate those answers to the questions and also just the care that's gone into every step of this program. So thanks so much, and count me a supporter of the grant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Braden. If she's not, Councilor Braden. Nope. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for hosting today's hearing, and also to the Walsh administration for putting the matter forward as we continue to try to mitigate the damage of COVID-19. As it pertains to our economy, we must continue to prioritize protecting individuals and families in our city who are struggling. And this grant from the U.S. Treasury Department is a godsend, quite frankly, for countless of Bostonians who've been living in fear of being evicted, having their utilities shut off, or they've been racking up, potentially, life-altering debt. As well as those that have missed payments, et cetera. So for this reason, obviously it's critically important that we as a council expedite the matter following today's hearing and vote on it as soon as possible. And so look forward to you putting forth a committee report that speaks to just that. I also want to take an opportunity to thank the panelists here today. I know that the Office of Housing Stability and the Department of Neighborhood Development, the teams that are here, Kate from OHS and the chief and Tim and Rick, they've been doing tremendous work since day one. It's now almost been a full year. So want to continue to work with them and give them the resources they need to continue to make a difference. And all of us as councilors, our phones are ringing nonstop, with residents and constituents looking for assistance. And more often than not, we've been on the phone with the panelists on a regular basis, just looking to help people, helping keep them in their homes, helping stave off evictions and foreclosures, and also helping them with their small local businesses. So we're going to continue to do that as a council. We're going to continue to work with them, but I'm excited to support this committee report when you, Madam Chair, put it forward. And I want to thank, obviously, the U.S. Treasury as well for thinking of Boston and giving us some resources so we can help people. And that's what this business is about. The business is about helping people and connecting folks to resources. And so happy to listen to the testimony. And I know that questions have been asked and answered and on the line of what I would be asking. So I'm just looking forward for expediting passage. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Just a couple follow-up questions. The deck, by the way, was excellent. And so I think I'd love to know if you have any more promotional materials that we could use as city councilors in more than one language about the rental relief program. I love the city of Boston. I work for you guys, but I can't believe that elected officials are like, what, fifth in being able to get this out. So I challenge my colleagues. We should compete, and we should be doing our best to, make next time when that survey comes back and they say, how did they find out about this money? We should be number one. There's like 13 of us. So, so that's one thing. I wonder if you can get over the ways in which we can promote this. That's one. And then in terms of you said $400 million came to the state, and this you may not have an answer to, but if we're about 10% of the population, and I know we're way more in terms of population, in terms of eviction and housing crisis than the rest of most of the state, the 20 million seems not as much as what we are deserving of. Is there a push to get more from the state? Or are we happy with what we got?
Yeah, the reason why we got the amount that we got was because of the way the federal law is set up. And it is definitely a smaller percentage than our population would be. So that is why we are being very forceful with the state that Boston residents can use the state program as well. That's also why it's useful that they're setting up the program with some of the affordable housing developers while we're working with the BHA. So we're very much going to make sure that Boston residents can access the state funds. Okay.
All right. That's much more comforting. And then in terms of just, I'm really excited about what the Biden administration has said about pathways to citizenship and so on and so forth. But in my district, I have a lot of TPS, mixed status families, folks with no status. And so how are we, or is this following the strict guidelines for folks who are mixed status families, or how is this, how am I making sure that all of my residents who I value, no matter their immigration status, are helped? You're on mute, Sheila, or no?
Sorry, I was sort of looking at Taylor because
so can answer both questions because I think they're connected in terms of the outreach materials and supporting those households who are in or mixed status families, because I think that we want to really communicate to folks the ability to apply for this assistance and really making sure that our outreach materials is reflective and communicates that. So can definitely pass along. We're updating our materials based on the new program guidelines, but can certainly share that new information that can be shared with communities that are kind of in that category.
Okay. And then in terms of the Since we did get an update on the rental relief program, I was wondering if there's an update on the Housing Notification Act and how many notifications have been given to the Office of Housing Stability from landlords when they're going to evict. Just curious if it's working.
So it is working. We have received over 3,500 notices to quit to date, a lot of them by hard copy. We are almost done finalizing that electronic landlord portal. It's like the OHS infrastructure week. I keep saying every week it's going to be finalized, and it will be shortly. So we are excited to have that finalized soon. And then we're also working on a plan to reach out to those tenants who have received 30-day notices to quit. But there have been no complaints yet to the Office of Fair Housing for anyone who has violated that, for any landlord who has not submitted, if that was also part of your question.
No, I'm actually a little disheartened that it's been 4 months and 3,500 people are facing. I didn't realize it. I mean, it's great in terms of you now can do, I think, a lot of the eviction spotting, the hot spots, the building clear outs, those kinds of things. You can start to do that now. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the exact language. I hope it doesn't expire based off of the declaration of emergency and COVID, right? It goes on forever. Yeah. So we'll be able to long-term be able to see at least further upstream than we did before, right? As a city. But I mean, that's what, 800 or so. I'm bad at math, so it passed in October. It became effective immediately. I think November, December, January, February, 4 months.
Yep.
3,500. It's a little over 800 evictions filed just in Boston a month.
Well, so those are notices to quit, not evictions filed. So the trend we are seeing, counselors, that some entire buildings, they will send out a notice to quit February 2nd. You'll get a notice to quit for late payment. So I mean, those are some of the trends we're seeing, and then they're immediately cured. So that's why we're trying to come up with a plan to reach out to the 30-day notices, because it's going to be almost impossible for us to hit those 14-day notices. So that's why we're looking at the trends and figuring out the best way to reach out to those folks.
So do you have, I mean, maybe not now, how many folks have been able to avoid eviction then? Of the 3,500, how many went to court afterwards or didn't go to court, do you know? You may not have that yet. I'd love to get that.
No, we don't have that yet, but I do know we do receive calls into the hotline because they have received that piece of paper from that notice to quit. It's been highly effective in my opinion, but I don't have the exact numbers for you, but I do think it's been highly effective.
No, I'd love to get that to find out, so now that you've got 3,500 intents to quit, but it actually resulted in only, whoever knows, 300 actually going to court because of the upstream services, the mediation, the so on and so forth that you guys kept putting in and making sure that the funding got there, then the rent relief and the back and prospective rent was provided. So then eventually the person didn't have to go anywhere. So that,
and I can tell you that from our housing court docket project, because we have our eyeball on every single case that's been filed, 885 cases have been filed against Bostonians since the eviction moratorium lifted. We're seeing amounts of $50 for an eviction case up to $40,000 for an eviction case. And we definitely reach out to those landlords, and we want to know why that's happening and what's going on. Excellent.
So that's it for my questions. Folks, from my colleagues, unless there's any burning questions, we got a great update. I think you can hear the overwhelming support. We absolutely need this money sooner rather than later. So I'm going to go ahead and mark it up for next week's vote for the city council. So unless anyone has any other further questions, I don't think we obviously don't need a working session on this or anything. So I think we'll just get this relief to folks as soon as possible. So thank you so much. With that, I'm going to end this hearing.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.